Somebody needs their feet. Let's sew those on. First, I'm going to stuff them. I'm going to leave this straight section empty, and I'm going to lightly stuff this section. We don't want it so full that it's going to be something that really pushes the seedling up and back, but we want it to be sort of generous and fun. So I've got my fluffy stuffing. Let's see how much we need. I'm going to start small and just kind of ball it up. And let's stuff it in and see. Make sure that you get right to the sides of that shape, no matter what size you're doing. And then what I like to do to test if it's right is I pinch on the straight bit and see what it looks like from here. And that's looking reasonable, I think. So that'll still look like a big, generous foot without necessarily being huge. Pro tip, always make sure your feet are stuffed the same amount. Mine are not, so I'm going to take a little bit out of this one. In terms of positioning, sometimes you want to try things out. You might want to, so in the instructions for this pattern, I've said go 1/3 of the way up the decrease line here. So that would be about here. And then I like to line mine up so they're centered on the eyes. So what I can do is use, I've got a DPN here, and then we'll use a sewing needle here. And just see what I think. That's about the same distance up. And then we'll look, but definitely not centered on the eye. I have found that in all 3 sizes, centering them on the eye meant that the tips of the feet were almost touching or were touching, depending on how things worked. So in terms of placement, it's a sort of a very ballet posture. All right, so I'm going to do this. And we'll double check that we like that. One of the things that can really change how this stuffy looks is how the angle of the foot bottom is. So if it's sort of oriented so that they're straight at the center of the decreases like a clock, that's going to look very different than if they're oriented more flat as though it was a piece of paper. I like having the diagonal. I think it really helps. And so yeah, this looks good. I've got these tested by having them this way. One thing I will say is a pro tip from experience, don't take the needle out and fix this one first, because then you won't have this one in position. So whichever one you've noted with the sewing needle, if you're doing like I'm doing, that's the one you attach first. Alrighty, so I'm gonna sandwich the stuffy between my fingers and thumb. It doesn't matter which side your yarn is coming from. If it's coming from this side, just start on this side and work this way. All right, so what I'm going to do is on the side where my yarn is coming out, I'm going to go through the bottom of the stuffy. Then I'm going to go through both layers of the foot so that the opening is going to be shut by what we're doing. And then I'm going to come back down and around and do that same thing over and over. Grab some bottom, 2 layers of foot. Grab some bottom, 2 layers of foot. Now, if this is a decoration, you can go a little farther between these stitches and you don't have to worry as much. If it will be a toy, this will need a lot more reinforcing. I would go very closely together across these. I would also sew it from the other side and do something to keep the stuffing up top, probably a little more. So I will show you what I mean for those. All right, make sure I get the last corner here. All right, now that has slipped way forward. This is no longer 1/3 of the way up the foot. I've got that completely wrong. So the reason that's not going to look so good is that what's going to happen is rather than nestling nice and up next to the body, it's going to stand out and then have this, which is a very different look. And I prefer this. If you prefer this, you do you. So I'm just going to undo these. If it's really difficult for you to tell because the yarn is dark, just kind of pull on the side and the next stitch will kind of open up and reveal itself. Pretty close to the tippy tip and then about 1/3 of the way up. So let's make sure that I get that right. And now let's look. Yep, that's pretty much centered on my eye there. All right, so I have to make sure that the way I'm holding it isn't sort of gently moving it forward all the time. If you notice your yarn kind of untwisting as you work, just let the needle dangle and it'll sort of zip back up. One more check. Yep. See how it's just sitting nicely with the bulb of the foot kind of protruding there. So as I said, if this is going to be a toy, you're probably going to want to secure it in more than one direction because anything that sticks out tends to be a point kids carry things by. So what I would like to do then is just put my yarn underneath, not through the foot. And then I would also whip stitch from here down. Just, it doesn't matter, you don't have to go through both layers at this point on the foot. You can just grab sort of like one part of a stitch, like one V of a stitch, and then go through the body. Once you've secured it in a few places like that, or all the way across, depending on the temperament of your child. So if you, let's say I've gone all the way across, what I would do then is I would bring my yarn back to the middle somehow, get to the other side of the foot, and I would insert up into the foot and come out sort of almost all the way up this straight part, and I would just stitch down and through the foot and then come through the body. And then go back down through the foot. And you could do that a couple times, and that will do a couple of things. It will encourage the stuffing to stay in the top half here, and it will also just really reinforce things. Whenever you're burying ends, if you're doing a toy and you want to tie a knot, if you're not doing a toy, you can simply pull the yarn through. If it's just a decoration, pull the yarn through, pull it tight, and then just snip real close and the tail will disappear. But if you want to do a knot, I like to come away from wherever I've been working usually and come back to the bottom here. And then what I do is I go into one of the in-between spots between two stitches. So in the rows of stitches that are V's, the running thread between them makes sort of a ladder going all the way up, and I go under a leg of that ladder and make a loop. And then I go through the loop twice. I use my thumb and finger to nudge that knot tighter, tighter, tighter so that it's as close to the body as I can make it. And then when I plunge the yarn through and I come through at the body, I tug until that knot goes all the way inside the body. It will disappear, and then I can pull tight and snip, and that end just disappears inside the body, never to be seen again. So that's how the feet are sewn on.